Good evening. We are going to order the Keizer Planning Commission on June 14th at 6 p.m. We're in the Keizer Civic Center. For the record, Debbie's note of attendance. Let me turn my mic on. All right, first order of business is to consider the minutes from May of 2023. Is there a motion on the table for the minutes?
I move to approve the minutes as presented.
I'll second.
I got a motion to approve is submitted by Commissioner Saldivar and seconded by Commissioner Grants. Any discussion on the minutes? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion passes unanimously with one absent, I believe. Yep. All right, moving into appearance of interested citizens. What I'll ask before we go into that, are you wanting to speak on the public hearing or are you wanting to talk under public testimony? Just under public testimony? All right, David Dempster, come on up, please. And if you would, please state your name and city of address for the record.
David Dempster, Keizer. I'm here representing the Traffic Safety Bicycle Pedestrian Committee in the city of Keizer. We're doing a bunch of things. We wanted to make sure committees and other people knew what we were doing. And we don't overlap with you, but we have topics that we have in common that we're both studying. And we start our meetings all the time with interested citizens. And they're not so much complaints as concerns people have. And you could kind of forecast that what we hear a lot about, which kind of impacts you guys, is traffic problems, speeding, pedestrian issues. For example, speeding on, since we've put in the traffic circle, speeding from Lock Haven to the traffic circle, from Lock Haven on Chemawa to the traffic circle. So I'm inverted to the traffic circle, Lock Haven, and there's a bad corner in there. And I suppose that influenced, I mean, you can see now looking back when they planned Chemawa, if they planned it, it's created a problem with injuries and property damage. We now have several complaints now coming in. You could expect we were going to get concerns about the traffic circle. There's a certain segment of the population that doesn't like traffic circles. But another side problem that's come up that I'd never even thought about was not the speeding through the traffic circle, but the speeding after the traffic circle. So if you watch what you do when you go into it, you slow down. The 25 is not a problem. Most people do that. But as you come to your exit, you tend to accelerate. Not that you're going that fast, but you probably don't look at the crosswalk that's 60 feet in front of you. And if somebody started that crosswalk, you won't see them. Your eyes are at the traffic circle, at cars, and there's 4 crosswalks there right as you come out of the traffic circle. So I suppose when you're planning, you have to think about that. Windsor Island Road, we've had problems with that, speeding. It's a blind corner. We're probably going to make a suggestion, I suspect, about the speed limit and no parking down along that area. Brooks and Alder, we've suggested they put in a flashing pedestrian light. We've got flashing pedestrian lights on the road, process starting at the north entrance to McNary High School, here at the Civic Center, and the one at Brook and Alder, and other people that issue's coming up. There's a bunch of things that are just common. We suspect that there's going to be a lot more interest in pedestrian and bicycle traffic in the future. And it's important that that's taken into account. There's nothing, I don't know, I'm kind of a pessimist. I don't think there's anything you can do to River Road to make it safe for a bicyclist. We recommend people ride on the sidewalks, which is kind of counter to if you have people on the sidewalks, but it's safer than trying to ride your bike in the street. So that's just a a problem. But the bicycle issue throughout the rest of the city, it's an issue. We have in regular areas, one of the things we talk about, safe routes to school, which has to do with planning the width of streets. That if you're adding for example, if you wanted to add an 8-foot pedestrian bike path, you need more easement in the future than we have now. We also don't need sidewalks up next to the curb. These are just issues that have come up repeatedly because garbage cans get put there in the middle of the sidewalk, which is, I think it's illegal, but it's at least not a nice idea. Mailboxes are out there for the mail person, which are also in the way of the sidewalks. So we've had complaints for wheelchairs, walkers, kids with walkers, people with kids, babies. It's difficult to maneuver. Safe routes safe route to park is new. State push. You watching my time for me?
No.
Just wave it. Safe routes to parks is a newer issue, and it's important. The other thing the major things right now is the long-range traffic plans for Keizer. I'm sure that you guys are probably going to be involved in that also. So are we. And so we'll have hopefully come up with recommendations about future things that need to be done. We've been working on the Parkway bike path signage for 4 years now. Working with ODOT's not always the easiest thing to do, but we finally got it through, and we're getting some signage, for example, at Sherry, that tells you where the bike path goes. Now, if we could just get under Lockhaven and into Keizer Station a little easier with some signage there, we'll be in good shape. And plus, access to the bike path from for example, the schools and neighborhoods, those need to be improved. So we're looking at that. Okay, so we're looking at the traffic plans. That's going to be the next year. And I'm not sure where the city is involved. I know SCATS is doing it. There's some research going on. I'm not sure how good, what they're actually doing. And if you don't know, just on the side, we're the group that works with the city of Keizer and gives away bicycle helmets.
Yeah.
And Hirsch, Sangster, and I have been trying to figure out how many we gave away. I've been giving away helmets for 18 years here in Keizer. And so how many do you give away? Well, I know we give at least 100 away a year for 20 years, but that would be the minimum. And a lot of times, like at I think it's the River Church puts on their big event in August, right before school starts. We always give, 30, what did we give last year? Of $300 worth, that would be 60 helmets. So events like that, now those aren't given away. We ask for donations, but very often we'll go to a school. We've gone to Samanka House. We've gone to the special schools for the city of Keizer and within Keizer and just given the helmets away. And we can buy a helmet. The price has gone up, but they're about $12. And so we ask for a $5 donations, which makes us the worst business people in the world. So. The last thing was, and I wanted to bring it up, it's kind of important right now. We're not sure where to go. We have a lot of problems about Verda. And if you've driven on Verda, you know that the section of Verda from the traffic circle to Dearborn, at this point in time, is probably the worst area we have in the city of Keizer for potential injuries. If you've ever paid attention, the east side of that road has a rather large ditch. So it's dangerous, and there's no, even though I think there's a bike lane there, it's still dangerous. And if there's any pedestrians over there, it's dangerous. And there's no sidewalk on either side. Keizer Road, which I've heard people thinking of increasing the use of Keizer Road by doing something to the baseball park. Keizer Road doesn't have sidewalks. During the baseball season, somebody needs to plan what to do up there, because when the parents park to take their kids to the baseball game, they park, I think they're only allowed to park on one side. There's no sidewalks. There's no bike lane. You end up with about a 9-foot strip that you expect the kids to bike, cars pulling in and out, skateboards, pedestrians, people with walkers, and it's not this wide. Really dangerous. Plus, it's corroded, so that there's tons of gravel on it, which make it dangerous to kids on bikes. You got pretty good, it needs to be taken care of. And I don't know if you guys are involved in that planning of the baseball complex. But something has to be done to Keizer Road, no sidewalks. Plus, the elementary schools there were really concerned that it's a dangerous walk for the kids. When the apartment goes in, one of the questions we have, I guess we're looking at it to find out, are they putting in a push-button red light crosswalk in the middle, right at the center between Dearborn and Shamawa? Again, I mentioned people are speeding coming out of that circle. You're putting in an apartment building, and I don't know offhand how many units it is, but we suspect there's going to be a bunch of kids, or some kids anyway. There's no place to cross Verda except at Dearborn and at the traffic circle. If you think the kids are going to go to either of those places and cross the street to go to the school, that's probably not going to happen. And I wish to tell you that I wish all the parents would walk their kids to school. I don't think that's going to happen either. So it's really dangerous, and we don't know what the plan is. And we haven't been able, I'm supposed to go down, I don't know who I talked to. You, tomorrow? Or Bill, because they don't know exactly what the apartment building plans to do about all that, or if anything. We can't find it written out.
At this point, there is no push-button RFP that's planned for that location.
Right, but they are in the middle of, so somebody in the back of their mind has a plan, whether they're going to do anything about it or not. So that is right now the major issue, which we'll talk about again tomorrow night. Okay.
Mr. Dempster, thanks for coming here.
Yep.
You brought up you and I have talked about the Keizer Little League parking thing a bunch of times. Safe Routes to Schools is a great program, but it's hyper competitive and the funding is really, really hard to come across. I know
Yes.
that you guys have worked on a variety of different applications, so all I can say is there's a bunch of stuff that unfortunately we don't have a lot of control on, but keep doing the good work. I know you guys are bringing these issues up a lot, and I for one appreciate it as a parent with young kids.
Well, we wish this committee would solve all the problems, but
Well,
probably you tried. No, I know, we know. And yeah, the Safe Routes to School, when you don't have people hired to get the grants from ODOT, it makes it complicated.
right.
I mean, it's not always good. And sometimes our plans aren't, it takes so much research to get ready. For Safe Routes to Park, they ask you questions that we don't have offhand answers to, which may take us a year to find out. How much traffic? How many people walk that park? How many people use it on a per daily basis? We don't have those figures.
Well, like I said, keep up the good fight. Appreciate the work you're doing.
Anything you want us to look at?
Not off the top. I mean, we've got a list of things, particularly on the transportation system plan, and a bunch of other things that Shane's got on the list of items. But these are, very high level policy discussions. So nothing in particular that I can think of, commissioners, anything. No. So
Okay.
appreciate it. Thank you for being here tonight. And I love seeing people come in and provide testimony. It doesn't happen very
As
often.
long as I don't take up too much time.
No,
I don't want to be like the city council and be here till midnight.
no. I won't allow it. I won't allow it.
Smoother operation.
Well, thanks. I'll take that as a compliment. Debbie, we'll just note for the record that Commissioner Avishon showed up at about 6:05. Great. Mr. Blake? You signed up? Do you want to talk? Gary? Yeah. You don't? Okay, great. I had your name written down, so I just wanted to make sure to call on you if you wanted to come up and say something. Great to see you here. All right. Nothing? All right, let's move on. We will go to our public hearing on the Planning Department Administrative Action Fees and Land Use Fees Discussion 2.19. I'm just making that up, that's not real. We'll open the public hearing at 6:14.
Thank you, Chair Lawyer, Planning Commissioners. Ooh. There we go. So I know sometimes life feels a little deja vu-ish. That is one of these meetings. Beforehand, our legal counsel said, Shane, would you like to do your mea culpa first, or I'll do mine first? And I said, well, I think I should do mine first. So in the staff report, which I sent out, ultimately, we needed to bring this back for a public hearing. There is a huge change of a whopping 1% difference than last month's meeting when we had the first public hearing. And the issue became our legal assistant pointed out an error that Shane is responsible for, so I'll take all the credit for the mistake. But there was a discrepancy in the years and how we calculated it. And of course, our legal assistant is very thorough, and when we said, yeah, okay, got the decision to move it forward to council, she said, Shane, that's not quite right. So the good news is the difference was I was off by 2 years, so it was a little bit confusing how it had been done the last time. I wasn't around. I mean, I was around when it was done, but I wasn't around when it was done. So anyway, it was a mistake on our part. Ultimately, it would have been a 4% change, which was a little bit more. But since we made that mistake in May, since then, the city council passed the city's budget at their last council meeting, which included a 3% cost of living adjustment starting in fiscal year 24. So the good news is that we didn't take a recommendation to council that was just straight out wrong or that was incorrect and immediately was out of date. So what we're proposing is a new chart that is all accurate. It has been double checked and triple checked. And it represents a 20.5% increase because of the cost of living aggregation. And that's just straight line math. It's not like aggregating it every single year or whatever that's called. I'm not an accountant. So that's what we have before you for your consideration. Again, I'll kind of broken record it from last month. If you had a change of heart and said, oh, I don't want to do any of this, well, here's your opportunity. Hopefully that's not the case. If that is the case, we need to adopt fees for the middle housing land division stuff. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that I can. And I know before we put a motion on the table, Councilor Johnson needs to explain a couple things as well. So with that.
I only have one question.
Yes.
Did we determine, can we index it?
Councilor Johnson.
Because that was one of the key parts of the motion last time, was whether or not we can index it. But it sounds like Mr. Johnson got an answer.
And that's the other part of the mea culpa. So the concept of indexing wasn't necessarily before the commission, but the commission, and I think as a practical matter, makes a lot of sense to index. We have other fees besides land use fees indexed, not 100%, but quite a few. But something was kind of niggling at me after you guys did that, and I wasn't quick enough. So something seems off about this. So I went back and talked to my assistant, and she dug up an old email. Before I explain this situation, I wanted to remind you, if you folks didn't remember, that this is way more complicated than it needs to be, thanks to various legislatures. Right. So there's several sets of fees within all the land use fees. Some are partitioned, some are subdivision, those are separate. Appeals are separate than the regular case. I can't remember how many other kind of various ways they split it. Not all fees need to be approved by the Planning Commission. But we felt, and I think it was for quite a few years, like, but some have to be. And it's like, well, why would we, if we're gonna have to take some, why don't we just take them all? Some fees do not have to be based strictly on actual costs. Some fees have to have a hearing, some don't. So we basically decided to go, what's the strictest one, and then do them all together. Not all fees require a hearing, not all fees go to the Planning Commission, have to go to the Planning Commission. So the heck, let's just do all the fees and have a hearing, even if some of them don't require that, before the Planning Commission. And some fees, like I said, are based on actual cost and have to have a hearing, and this is the important part, they have to have a hearing before they're increased. And that's the part that came back to me, and I'll just read a little snippet
okay.
of the email. But my advice back in 2014 was, although there's an argument to the contrary, I have concern about indexing fees, not all land use fees. In essence, you're raising the fee without a hearing requirement. So my suggestion is, unless you want to, parse it out, if you want to do them all the same way, then my suggestion is that your recommendation not include that. And what I had said back in that memo is that we just look at every couple of years going back with an increase. It's not a lot of work, it's some, and rather than relying on indexing. So that was my 2 bits worth on that issue.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, any additional questions, thoughts, discussions?
There any, there's nobody signed up, but.
No, I don't think we've got a couple folks here. Is there anybody who feels really strongly to talk about whether or not changing the annexation cost is gonna be an issue for you all? Not trying to be flippant, I'm just, we never have people, so it's very nice to look out there and see people. All right. No by the ways? No other questions? Left, right? All right. Do we feel good about closing the public hearing on this?
I move we close the public hearing.
All right, well, I will close the public hearing at 6:21, and we'll put a motion on the table, please.
Okay. I would like to make a motion that we recommend approval of the proposed fees to the city council as presented.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Herb to make a recommendation to city council on the fees as presented, and seconded by Commissioner Avishon. Any discussion? I will just say it's very nice to see that you are human. Thank you for making a mistake, and I mean, it's just nice. You don't do it very often. It's quite nice. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion passes unanimously. Well, that was painful-less. All right, moving on the agenda. Shane, we got, I think, new old business, right? No, other business staff report, sorry.
Yes, so there's a couple things I wanted to kind of give you heads up, updates, information on, I guess. And I placed at the dais a little handout that says walkable mixed use areas on it. I know I've talked about this with you all a couple times. We currently, the city of Keizer, is doing a study on walkable mixed use areas, something that's required of the CFEC rules and legislation that came out of that. The Council of Governments has been doing technical work for us. We had an engagement consultant kind of helping us with, actually they created some flyers for us and did some things, which was nice. We did a joint webinar with Salem back in the spring. I went and presented at the Community Diversity Engagement Committee, also attended the Southeast Keizer Community Dinner in May at their May dinner and kind of presented info. We have a web page up, and why I'm kind of giving you all the heads up is if you haven't gone and looked at any of the info, I encourage you to do so. We have a very brief, I don't even know if I want to call it a survey, because sometimes surveys are, people go, oh, too many surveys. It's really this really brief questionnaire that we have on our website, and it's going to be up there for a while. There's no deadline to it, but it asks some specific questions. And the big thing, and I know I've shared this before, so sorry that it's a little bit repetitive. Approaching the study, we are basically looking to try to build on our Keizer revitalization plan that we did from a few years ago. And in that revitalization plan, we identified some centers on River Road by Lock Haven, by Shamawa, and down by Sam Orcutt and Cherry Avenue. And in those areas, our code, as you all know, already allows a little more. than what would be allowed in other areas. A little more density, a little more opportunity. And the idea is that gives some flexibility for developers, for property owners, to provide some additional housing opportunities as well as commercial business and economic development opportunities. The rules that the state came up with for that may be a bit of a ways down the road. We've seen some what I would call mixed use light projects over the last couple of years. And I think that ultimately these rules, and the good news is I just got kind of it's a draft, final draft. It's a revised draft of kind of the study portion that the Council of Governments has done for us. And they kind of went through and have identified a little bit of, hey, here's what your areas allow, here's what they have to allow. So kind of almost like a gap analysis. And honestly, there's not a ton. Well, it was good news to me, and that there are some changes that we will need to make in these specific areas as we choose to designate those, once we designate those. But they're not huge changes. I mean, like right now we allow a 50-foot height. We're gonna have to allow at least a 60-foot height. So it's 10 feet more. Like at the end of the day, when you're standing on the street, you're not gonna be able to tell much of a difference. There is a little greater density we need to allow than what we allow now. Although, as we have discussed in the past, we're maybe a little low on the densities we allow for multifamily development and things like that. So I was encouraged that ultimately the work that we did with the revitalization plan from 2018, what we were already kind of, I won't say aspiring to, but trying to allow for, was kind of in line with some of these new rules that were coming out that we're now being, we have to do something. So the biggest thing I just wanted to kind of take away was, one, give you our pretty flyer. It's on our website. I think we've sent out, I think Debbie sent out to the citizens list this thing a while back, but I wanted to kind of give a plug for it. If you haven't checked it out, if you haven't done the survey, I'd encourage you to do so and share that out to people that you're in contact with as well, because we do want to hear people's concerns about the mixed use walkable areas and the locations we're selecting that we're looking at. If it's, if there's some big issue or concern, then those are things we want to know. Ultimately, by the end of this year, I have to submit the study to the state, and that's kind of what we have to do. And then within the following year, we will actually have to adopt the areas formally or make changes to the development code. So in this next year, assuming our study is accepted by the state and they don't come back to me and say, try again, do something different, I want to give you all a heads up so you have some time to kind of get your bearings, because at some point we will be having some public hearings on some text amendments to our existing standards to align those with these new rules.
Right.
So with that, I'd be happy to answer or try to answer any questions you might have on that
Sure.
piece.
Thank you, Chair Lawyer. I have two questions. Thank you for that. And the first one is, do we have any update on that lawsuit from our counselor there? And then the second one is for the Verda apartments, and now right in my backyard, the Manzanita and River Road, that is the same developer. And so I'm wondering, is it out of bounds to have that developer come and present to the planning commissioners and audience members too, to talk about what they're planning there and get ideas maybe? And because I think they do want to hear from the community about
Sure.
what the community wants to see there, and we certainly do as a commission. So that's my second question.
Okay,
Thank you.
sure. Well, I'll let Counselor Johnson answer the first one, and then I'll answer your second one.
And the first one was?
Lawsuit update.
The June 27th.
Oh, the lawsuit update.
Yeah.
I thought you were asking about the other project. I'm sorry, I apologize. I think I updated you last time. Nothing's happened since then. Oral argument before the Court of Appeals is scheduled for July 12th. I doubt that we'll hear anything before the end of the summer at the earliest. I will update you after the oral argument. I'm not positive I'll be going to hear it, but I'll be getting an update from some colleagues, and I'll let you know after that, kind of generally how it went. So that's the general timeframe. It's more likely closer to the end of the year for a decision. The end of summer would be a little optimistic, but they did act like they were trying to expedite it.
Did they,
And,
wasn't it in June? Did they bump it to July?
I'm sorry?
Was it, I thought it was towards the end of June. Did they bump it to July?
No, it was July 12th.
Oh, interesting.
If I misspoke, I apologize, no.
Okay.
Last time this came up, I think it was just last meeting,
Yeah.
I mentioned that we'd just gotten the date, and it was July 12th.
Got it, okay. Yeah.
Okay, so for the second portion of that question, as far as the developer and coming to planning commission and those kind of things, yeah, I mean, yeah, it absolutely would not be out of bounds. One thing I do want to kind of note, like, so the Verta Apartments, that was a comprehensive plan and a zone change process that started back in 2014. And it was a very long time ago. There was a bunch of hearings, and then the approval happened, and then it just sat there up until, a year ago or whatever it was. So it's kind of hard because there's often a disconnect on large projects of when they may get land use approvals and kind of some, vesting in their rights, and then until the ground actually starts to move, and then folks feel like that, oh, we haven't been engaged, we didn't get a chance to talk about it, et cetera, et cetera. The one thing about the Trail Manzanita area that you're talking about there, because that's in our River Cherry Overlay District, and the size of those parcels, that actually is going to require a master planning process. And it's never been master planned. It's a brand new master plan. And our process for master plan approval would be coming to this commission for a decision recommendation before it moves on to city council. So the one thing, and I know that the developer, and again, I don't exactly know, I mean, I'm not privy to the exact deals and what is set in stone. I've had several conversations. The city's met with them with some proposals. I actually have been playing phone tag with one of the primaries on that just recently because I'd had some discussions with his architect, and he's like, they're still moving stuff around. So like, I haven't even seen kind of here's what we're going to do. It's been all more higher level concepts to talk about what's going to be needed and kind of the general pre-application-y kind of stuff. So at some point, there will be an application. We will be setting it for hearing. You will be hearing from them very directly because you'll be hosting a public hearing for that. But the one thing I will say is that I know they've reached out to the McNary Estates neighborhood because I've had calls from them. And I know they have a desire to do maybe like a neighborhood meeting. And so that's something that there's been some discussions on that they may want to do before they even make an application. So, I mean, I'll keep you posted on that, how that works. And it's always hard because as a city staff person who's going to ultimately be making a staff recommendation to you, I don't want to be at meetings where they're asking questions as if I'm vetting it, because I don't have, until I see an application and I see what they're proposing and I can hold that up to kind of the light of my development code rules and regulations, I can't very well say if this is a good thing, is this a bad thing, things like that. So, but yeah, I think to your point, I think that's a great point to be had. And like I said, they have expressed a willingness to do those kinds of things. So I'll explore that a little bit more in depth. I think it's always the question is the timing of it, like when and how far out, because that's a really big project and there's a lot of infrastructure needs that are going to be associated with that. So, I mean, it may be a ways down the road before we actually see something being constructed there. So
My only thought on that is between now and then, we need to get a really good Shannon Johnson training on quasi-judicial processes.
If I may, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
It's funny you should mention that. It occurred to me, given the questions, everybody's going to be interested in this project. It is a really big project. As Chair Lawyer pointed out, when it comes to you, if the application comes in as a master plan hearing, that will be a quasi-judicial process. And so the rules regarding ex parte contacts need to be remembered. And my advice, of course, is to avoid those ex parte contacts. So it's counterintuitive in a sense. It's like, as Keizer citizens, as members of the Planning Commission, it's like, well, I want to get as much information as possible. Well, yeah, but if that happens, then those are ex parte contacts, which you're going to have to try to write down, remember, and to disclose. So you need to really get all your information about the project through the hearing process, through the staff report and through the evidence at the hearing, and not outside of that. is my
Well,
advice.
I just think it's really important to note for the record that nobody on this dais in this capacity has been in the quasi-judicial process. So I think it's just really important as we're leading up to those, and even before it really actually starts to become a reality, I would hope that we get that opportunity to sit down. You have a great training, but anybody
Okay.
that's never been exposed to that, I just think it's really important that we're
Well, I
very
can, I
clear on
can,
that.
I can look at doing that. Now, how many of you have either gone through my live or video training?
I think just you and I, right?
I didn't.
No?
Uh-oh.
You,
I
you,
haven't
Which
gone
one?
through his, but I have
Which
sat
one?
on,
the quasi-judicial
I
one.
haven't.
but I have sat on committees where I have done the,
You have?
yeah, right, but not through his, not
Okay,
his
great.
training, but yeah.
Well,
Well, I apologize. I didn't mean to speak for you then.
Well,
I will look at dusting that off.
I meant in our
That would
capacity.
be really, that would be very helpful, because we were thinking for the Greater Gubser Neighborhood Association too, as, you know, having them maybe come to National Night Out and talk to people from the neighborhood, and so
Right.
we need to make sure that we're all above board and not doing anything that's
Right.
against
Commissioner
any
Burson.
rules.
Sorry.
Thanks.
Commissioner Burson and Commissioner Saldivar.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I just was asking about which property is this that we're talking about? Is it the,
So the one that Commissioner Herb is talking about is the one right on River Road, just south of McNary Estates Drive, on both sides of
both
the
sides
road,
of the
like the
road.
bar, we call it the Isle of A property.
so it actually is sold now and,
It says sale pending on the sign. Like I said, I've had a lot of meetings. I don't know what the true, with big projects, there's a lot of times offers are made with big contingencies and extended timeframes for due diligence and closing and all of that. So I don't know the status for sure, but
so that being along River Road though, isn't that just in the, like I said, mixed use area, like,
yeah, that property has been zoned, everything north of Lock Haven has actually been zoned mixed use since I think 96? I think it was 96 when they did the McNair Activity Center plan. I don't work here then. But yeah, that's been zoned mixed use for a very long time.
so the hearing that we would have, I mean, what decision are we making? Because it seems like
Sure.
apartments, I mean, if that's.
Yeah.
the plan, that's mixed use.
There is an element of uses that come into play there. But we don't have a ton of master planned areas, but Keizer Station is the best example that I can point to, where that was a master planned area, that there's an overall kind of site plan showing overall design vernacular, transportation system, pedestrian connections, pedestrian facilities, all of those kinds of things. And there are specific criteria that we identified in our code, which there are some things about mix of uses, so it can't just be all apartments, it can't just be all commercial. It needs to have a mix and provide some different opportunities in housing. Another element of the master plan criteria in that specific area for the Lock Haven Center, because it is specific to the Lock Haven Center, is how connectivity works. Our transportation system plan identifies a relocation of the street and the traffic signal, and there's a whole transportation element that has to go into that. So those are the master plan. There are kind of specific criteria around that their applications have to meet with. But then there is with a master plan, there is a little bit, it's different than just checking all the boxes, because there are some things that are, is this meeting the intent and the purpose of the revitalization plan and the goals and policies that were identified in that? So, there may be things that Planning Commission wishes to condition an application on, or recommend a condition, I guess, that would say, yeah, we want to address this goal and policy in this way. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Commissioner Saldivar.
Thank you, Chair Lawyer. So on that same vein, and what Commissioner Herb had asked questions about having a developer come and present through the hearing process, and that's for the master plan, but I guess my question is, and maybe they need a historian to answer this, but why doesn't this body have the public hearings for the land use divisions, like many of our colleagues in the state do? Why is it that this city, why don't we do that again? That's my question.
I don't have a good answer for you on that, to be perfectly honest. It's not been done that way here in the past. I don't know if Councilor Johnson has a little more insight. He's been around longer than me, especially coming to this commission specifically.
Right. I am trying to remember, because, before I was the in-house counsel, I represented the city from the 90s. And I know that it's changed a little bit, a couple times over the years in terms of which applications the Planning Commission hears, but not substantially. I know that over the many years, at least a couple of times, the Planning Commission has at least considered, do we want to do more or less? And I think at one point they actually, and I'm trying to remember when the hearings officer came in and whether some of the applications didn't go to the hearings officer or not. But Shane is right. For the most part, the Planning Commission, and Commissioner Salvador is correct too, most planning commissions hear at least some, not all, but a large portion of applications. It's always just been kind of the tradition here not. Part of the reason was, I think, is especially in the past, there were so many applications in the old days. I'm not sure you folks would, I mean, at that time at least, that commission was like, you know, we'd rather just focus on legislative issues and certain design alternatives, I think, come here. And then the bigger ones like master plans came in. But that's certainly within your purview to recommend that if you want to look at that. Right now, as you know, and Shane and Dina could tell you because I can't keep track of it really, but certain applications are staff decisions unless appealed. Certain applications are hearings officer decisions unless appealed. And then some are a recommendation from the hearings officer, like a zone change. But very few initiate with the Planning Commission. Master plans is one with the recommendation to council. So if you want to look at suggesting something different, you certainly are within your rights to do so.
Part of the reason why I bring it up is, you know, we had a report from our pedestrian and bike safety committee, and some of the concerns are things that we never get to see and voice. And so there's not to say that, you know, the design was malice or anything like that, but I think giving opportunity for input from citizens, and especially those that represent, you know, the city of Keizer, and safety is what I'm used to. Like I sat on a committee very similar to this, and that's what we did. We looked at the safety thing. So we mentioned the sidewalks along the curb. You know, we would prefer, the counter that would be like a boulevard style sidewalk so that you have, you know, and I know that's not something that can be done.
Which, by the way, I think is more common now.
Right, right, and
It's
that's
required, the separated sidewalks. But
Yeah.
Yeah, so that, I mean, that lives in our street stand, that actually was brought into code. So I mean, that is something that would be somewhat in the Planning Commission's purview as we do text amendments.
Right.
Right now, our street standards, which are really public works design standards, but they're married out of the TSP. So for collector and arterial streets, our higher volume streets, our higher traffic streets, the standard is for separated sidewalks and boulevard style.
Yeah.
Local streets are not that way, although we have some local streets that have been built that way historically because of a desire, but that's not our standard. I mean, generally they take more room, it takes away more land, and there's maintenance concerns from our public works staff folks. They don't love that always. But, you know, I mean, but that is something that is, obviously that's would normally be a kind of a consideration through the design standards updates or through a TSP update.
And what my experience is that usually, you know, you have your design standards, and we know how engineering is, and, you know, on paper, it seems to be flowing really well, and isn't until you get input from citizens or our experience, we look at it and say, you know, it probably fits in 98% of the situations, but this one, and I've seen a really a great working relationship with developers and committees like this, where we say, is there any way we can, I know the rule says you can do this, but is there any way we can find some changes? I just think that it would be ideal for certain, I'm not saying everything, but big ones like you just mentioned, those are important for us to, I believe they're important for us to get the community involvement in some of it. And I haven't experienced any developers that were like, you know, the law says this and that's what I'm going to do. I think they're willing to work with the community and what we as a community would like to see done. So if there's any way for us to make some changes that we can see, to have some more input in some of that, and have the developers come through the hearing process and give us an opportunity to provide some input, like what the bike safety has gathered, their data. And I mean, if that's something that we can do, I'm not saying today, but
No,
yeah.
I'm going to chime in for a second. I'm glad you asked the question. It's a question I've had sitting on this commission now for, 4 or 5 years. Is it a matter of, and I'm just asking for the technical piece of it, is there a nuanced difference between what basically the state considers not right permitted use, where it's basically they fill out an application, they meet the conditions based off of the design standards, et cetera? Is that something that could come to the planning commission? Yes or no? I don't know. But for the most part, we're not doing conditional use stuff hardly anymore, right? Which most times conditional use permits would, in theory, could have a better chance of coming before the planning commission. Am I right on that? I mean, I'm glad we talked,
Yeah.
we've talked anecdotally, just you and I after the meetings. I've never, frankly, I've never known better than to not ask the question. So I'm really glad that you brought it up, because I think that it is important. And I think, if nothing else, if it brings people in and they can understand what is happening in their neighborhoods as a result of legislation that's happening coming out of Salem, at least, from a community perspective, you can say you've been informed.
Correct.
There's not a lot that can happen. Like, I don't think we have any authority necessarily to recommend no if they meet the criteria of what's allowed under the development standards, but at least there's an opportunity for them to come and present the application in theory. I think, is that kind of what you're talking about?
Yeah, yes, but in my experience, I have seen, even though our building standards will say one thing, the committee can make a recommendation and ask the developer with the community there, say, can you add boulevard-style sidewalks opposed to, the sidewalks on the curb? And that's up to them to do. And that I've seen happen and very successful. Now, is it always going to be that way? I don't know, but, and I'm not sure what kind of, beholden piece, but it was always something with, we recommend, and of course, the city council is gonna be or if it's the design, the planners that have the final say, but we could always make a recommendation.
Just getting the input and the
Right.
dialogue between
Right.
the
Yeah, I mean,
community and the developer and the commission.
But I also recognize, being staff in a government agency, it does require a tremendous amount of work it would require a tremendous amount of work on Deanna's part and Shane's part. And, I think there's a balance, right? Because it's like, are they spending all their time doing this or actually working on legislative stuff that the state says they have to do? I don't know. I think it's a worthy conversation to have, and I don't know what it looks like.
Well, I got the land use that has requirements for public hearings, where do you do those at? Here, on the planning commission?
Well, so subdivisions,
Right.
they're heard by the hearings officer. We have a
Yeah.
contract hearings officer, so when we have a subdivision comes in, we schedule it with him, we hold the hearing here.
Okay,
Interesting.
Yeah.
right.
Well, I want to get to Commissioner Grants, then we'll go back to you.
Thank you, Chair Lawyer. I've got a couple discussion topics, responses. As a second generation member of the Planning Commission, I can tell Commissioner Saldivar, we did definitely have public testimony, public hearings in this body before. I know subdivisions were one of them.
Yeah, right.
I can't speak as to why that changed, but I do know that it did happen. And then Commissioner Herb, you asked, in your question, you asked about the project on Verda. Shane mentioned that the comp plan zone change, land use, public hearing portion of that was many, many years ago. Many jurisdictions have, they have another land use application step before building permit issuance. Keizer is probably one of the few cities in Oregon that doesn't have some kind of a site plan review, land use application. I've had a conversation or two with Director Witham over the years and just mentioned that and brought that up. I don't know if that would be something that staff would appreciate having or lament having. But that process does afford one more opportunity for the public to see the specifics of the development plan and to comment on them. I know with housing, there's not a lot of flexibility in those standards. The legislature has taken a lot of that flexibility away from local jurisdictions over the years. But I just wanted to mention that.
Thank you.
Commissioner.
Thank you for that. Just to follow on with what you're saying, that Verda, where Mr. Dempster said there's no crosswalk and light to the school. I mean, that seems odd that during that planning, that wouldn't have been brought up and made happen, you know. But
No, it's interesting because I actually sat here during that, and at the time, the school district basically said they didn't expect a volume of traffic and kids going to Kennedy that would necessitate or otherwise, I think it was something to that effect, like basically, we're not really worried about it. Like it's a negligible increase.
well, that's
Like,
110 apartments right there.
I'm totally parafrasing, but it was something to that effect. I
Yeah, there-
recall. Sorry, I don't mean
That
to cut you
seems
off.
odd. Well, but then just, you know, selfish motive. You keep talking about that light is going to change at Manzanita and River, right there where the mobile station is. So, because, I mean, the last thing I want to see, or any of my neighbors want to see, is Manzanita now becoming a thoroughfare from River to Lock Haven, from all the, you know, the new apartments there. And so I'm hoping that that gets closed off, and then the light moves, like trail kind of comes up to River instead. Is that the vision there?
Yeah, so the transportation system plan, the city's current transportation system plan, which was adopted in 2009. So it's been like a long time that this has been the plan. With the TSP, you look at overall transportation network for your whole city, and you project out growth in the planning horizon in a 20-year period. You look at how traffic volumes are going to increase. So what we call the trail avenue realignment, essentially in the TSP, is kind of a multi-pieced transportation element that was identified back in 2009. And I don't have it in front of me. I had nothing to do with the TSP in 2009, to be perfectly honest, but I'll paraphrase it for the kind of the general understanding of it. Essentially, way back then and currently now, I mean, I live up north in North Keizer. I live up North River Road, so I see it every night. Matt Lawyer lives up there. He sees it every night, unless I'm working late, and then there's no traffic. But one of the concerns has been for a very long time is the traffic patterns of River Road carrying 30-some thousand trips a day, freeway traffic coming off of the freeway down Lock Haven, hitting River Road and stacking up that intersection, and then the Wheatland River split, and that Wheatland left, especially stacking up that intersection through the light sometimes, and a little crazy. I know I used to live off of Wheatland. I've almost gotten hit a few times there going home at night. So that had been identified with a couple of different traffic elements that are needed in the planning horizon to address that growth. One is a double turn lane at Wheatland. A second is moving the intersection of McNary Estates Drive south to create more separation for stacking. So in the movement of that little Manzanita stub right behind the gas station, that just goes away. I mean, it would go away. It would become developable land essentially. But then a new road would bisect the big property, lock or tie into trail, and then go across and actually align with Verda. So that the idea is that traffic coming from the freeway, people going north can peel off on that new public facility that's built appropriately and sized appropriately for traffic volumes to help also reduce the issue at Lock Haven and River. So that's kind of what, not an engineer, definitely not an engineer. I can't do basic math, as you saw from the chart. But, you know, this is kind of what the traffic engineers came up with back in 2009. So we, as the land use planners for the city, when development happens on those properties that identified these areas for improvements, then that's kind of what triggers and pushes that needle forward. And I mean, I guess the other argument would be is if the city had unending streams of funding, we would love to build out all the identified improvements in the TSP that things are like what you'd like to have. Honestly, what Mr. Dempster talked about, you know, there's been a long held understanding and a desire to have better sidewalk and bicycle facilities throughout our city and everywhere. Again, it comes, how do you fund those types of projects? So anyway, but does that help kind of answer that question on that concern?
Closing that was perfect.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, any other questions or comments for Shane or Dina or City Attorney Johnson? No? You have one more?
I have one more
have one
thing I
more?
want to make sure to share with you guys, and this is the other thing that's on your dais that Debbie provided you. The city is doing a strategic planning effort currently, the city council is. And this one is a survey that we're asking everybody in the city to take. So if you've seen it and taken it, awesome. If you haven't, I'd ask you to take it. They're trying to close this survey by the end of June. So we're really trying to like push it out to every meeting. Any meeting that you go to, you're going to hear about it. But Debbie provided the handout. We have some little QR code cards on the back table as well. There's posters and things in the lobby. Like I said, it's a brief survey kind of talking about the city as a whole and what we as a community and citizens in Keizer want to see in the next 5 years. So
So go to Keizer.org, find the survey, do the survey. Keizer.org, find the survey, do the survey.
yes.
Because Shane said so. Keizer.org, find the survey, do the survey. 3 times, isn't that the rule on radio, right? All right. Counselor Kohler, welcome. First time at the Planning Commission, at least with me anyways. Glad to have
It
you
is
here.
my first trip here. It's been exciting. I do have a crazy question. So I see things that come to the council all the time that say, Planning Commission has recommended this or that, but then sometimes we don't hear anything at all. Does the Planning Commission, do they have any say in master plan changes? Or is that something that is done without them?
So currently in our code amendments that have already been approved by city council, just go back to city council for the minor amendments. New master plans go to the planning commission first.
So like, for example, that area that the tribes are looking to develop, that's something that these guys wouldn't see.
That was a straight amendment.
Okay, thank you. That was one of those questions that I had, because I know that there's a lot of changes that are happening there, and I would think that these guys would want to know what some of those are, but that's, I guess, come talk to these guys and they can tell you about the hotel and other stuff that they're planning there. But thank you for what y'all do. It's obvious that for me to sit where you guys are would be pointless because you guys understand a whole lot more about this than I do. So thank you for what you do.
All right. Couple of little things here. There's a little half sheet on your dais here. This Friday and Saturday is going to be the 40-year celebration for Keizer. There's going to be all kinds of fun festivities. I heard that Councilor Kohler is going to dress up as a jester. Maybe not, but it would be funny if he did.
We'll take that under advisement.
There's going to be all kinds of great things going on Friday and Saturday night, so take a look at it. A lot of effort going into making this event successful. Shane, I feel like we're forgetting something.
No, there is one more thing. I didn't know if you wanted to talk about it first or if you want me to talk about it first. All right, well, as you can see from Debbie's balloons, this is going to be Debbie's last meeting at Planning Commission. Debbie is retiring, and I wanted to make sure to say, Debbie, we love you, we appreciate you, we thank you for all that you do for not just the Planning Commission, but everything at the city. You were an amazing lady. And I did want to share just a funny story. So Debbie has worked for the city, just if you don't know this, Debbie's worked for the city for like 20 years. Like, right, your 20-year anniversary is this summer, right? Like right around the time you retire. I've worked for the city a little longer than that. And I will never forget, an early memory of Debbie was my 29th birthday. Okay. I turned 29 years old here, and somebody said something about being 29. And Debbie laughed at me because she said, Shane, how old are you this year? And I said, I'm 29. And she was like, ha ha, yeah, really, how old are you? And so she didn't believe me that I was 29. I think she thought I was older than that. And I just thought about that today because I don't feel like Debbie looks or acts like she is old enough that she should be allowed to retire yet. Yeah. And, so I just, I wanted to say, just for all you guys, and I know you get emails from Debbie, so you know she does things. But Debbie really makes Planning Commission run. I mean, she is my reminder, my clock, my appointment reminder, my Shane, you need to make sure you get this in at this time person. So I'm going to apologize ahead of time for, the next few months when we don't have Debbie. If things fall off, it's Debbie's fault, so we can blame Debbie. But we did, we brought some cookies, so have a cookie. And I just wanted to kind of just acknowledge Debbie's service to the city, because she has been an amazing deputy city recorder and an amazing support to not just the Planning Commission, but all the commissions that she supports. She does a great job, and she's irreplaceable, and she's going to be hugely missed. I know Dina and I are going to miss her, because not only is Debbie great at her job, but she's just an awesome person. So Debbie, thank you.
Well, Commissioners, I'd like to open up the table if anybody has anything to say for Debbie, or we've signed our cards, which might be good enough, but if anybody wants to say anything?
I'll just say, I thank you so much. I mean, I haven't been on the committee as long as many members here, but you have definitely been a huge help and encourage and reminding and all that. I mean, the work, I know the work behind the scenes, those emails, I know it takes a lot of effort to do, to keep our, herd the cats, right? Especially when we're new, we don't know what's going on. And so, I thank you for all that you've done.
I'd like to add the same. I'm probably newer than anybody else in here, and the help you provided me to come up to speed has been immense, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Debbie, I've had the opportunity to work with you for almost 9 years now in a variety of capacities, and I screwed it all up last night. For those of you that don't know, I thought last night was your last Parks meeting, brought in some former colleagues, we made a big embarrassing to-do about it, and then she's like, no, I'm here next month. So sufficiently embarrassed, and it's not often that I'm at a lack of words, but, I think that the one thing, everything we can talk about Debbie being the consummate professional and being everybody that keeps us all together, that's known. But I think that the one thing that nobody will ever appreciate about Debbie Lockhart is the fact that she was the driver for all volunteerism that happened in this city for these boards and commissions. She worked tirelessly for years, bringing people in, making recommendations, trying to bring in new blood, trying to make sure that everybody had their shot, making them feel welcome, making them just part of this experience. And I think that is one of the legacies that you will leave behind that is going to be sorely missed. And I think that, I hope that those of us that have had the opportunity to sit in a commission can kind of carry that spirit on for Debbie. Because frankly, I think that, what are we now? I mean, you've got maybe like 2 or 3 vacancies at a time now, if that. And there were, in the dog days, I think there were times where we were literally trying to find people like 5 or 6 years ago where Debbie's like, talk to anybody that has a pulse and can read, and I'm not, but she just built this environment of welcoming and getting the materials out there. And so I think that, all the great work, you've earned it, right? But the sheer volume of people that you encouraged and brought to the table and made them feel comfortable. I remember walking in for my first time for VCC, absolutely terrified. And you said, just sit down, it's going to be fine. Just do your best. And I was just like, okay. And then I was told, all these other things. But Debbie, you're amazing. Thank you for putting up with me for all these years. I know that I am not an easy person to deal with. I have a lot of questions, and sometimes I can go on and on like I am now. But truly well deserved. You'll be missed. I have no more bark chips for you tonight, but thank you for everything.
Hey, that jar you gave me those bar chips in was a cool jar.
Yeah.
You know that? It's an antique jar. 1948. I looked it up.
No kidding.
Yeah, it's worth $20. Do you want it back?
No. As long as it's under 50 and we only did one gift. Right?
As far as I know.
Memoranda, I think is what we're calling it, right? So anyways, Debbie, congratulations. I will be there Tuesday night for the council meeting. Just a quick, do we want a motion on the July meeting, or are we good just to cancel?
I think it'd be a good idea to have a motion.
Okay, last item to consider is canceling the July meeting. Anybody opposed to
I
that?
move to cancel the July meeting.
I'll second.
Any discussion? I want to talk about this. No, I'm kidding. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
I,
Any opposed? Say nay. Nay. I'm kidding. Aye. Motion passes. All right, we stand adjourned at 7:04 PM. Thank you, Debbie, for everything. You're amazing.